Hey everyone, welcome to another Power Monkey podcast. On today's episode, Chad and I interviewed James Nestor. James is a journalist and author whose most recent book, Breath, The New Science of a Lost Art, has become wildly successful. We're very excited to have James on board for this specific episode. The things that we talk about with regards to breathing are talked about with relation to mostly general population, but there are a lot of crossover into specifically the training and the fitness world. James's background as a journalist gives him a very unique perspective on what it means to have a breathing technique that's going to work for you. Some of these things might be a little bit frustrating or upsetting if they don't fall in line with the way that you guys are breathing right now, but I guarantee you if you start to look a little bit more in depth into the science, into what he's talking about, it could potentially change the way that you sleep, the way that you eat, and the way that you train. Hope you guys enjoy this one.
All right, James, hey, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Welcome to the show.
Right on. Thanks a lot for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I'm not sure how our producer talked you into coming on with us, but man, we're excited to talk to you. And I think really everyone's been learning a little bit more about this thing called breathing here lately. And I wonder, you took the time to write an entire book on this topic. What led you to that and why are you so passionate about it?
Yeah, I never in my life expected that I'd be writing a book about something so seemingly inconsequential as breathing. And even when I started thinking that this might be a book, all my friends were ripping on me. They're like, oh, cool. Yeah, sounds super fascinating. Anyway, but the deeper and deeper I got into this subject, the more I realized that so few of us are breathing correctly. Yes, there are ways to breathe incorrectly. It turns out the vast majority of the population is breathing incorrectly. And then as I started wading in even deeper, I was learning what breathing could actually do. This is something we do 20 to 25,000 times a day. And if we're doing something wrong 20 to 25,000 times a day, it can really wear our bodies down. So I had thought that breathing was just this autonomic function, which it pretty much is, just something that runs in the background. Don't have to think about it. That's great. But when you take control of it, you can take control of so many other elements and functions in your body to really push it into places that scientists considered medically impossible, except for the fact that people are now doing this all the time. So that's where I really got intrigued, and I thought that there was a larger story to be told here.
Yeah, for sure. As I was digging into this a little bit more, it made me think, we all have to eat. We all understand that we have to eat, but we can eat very poorly or we can eat very good in a way that will help benefit our body. And that kind of really put it into perspective for me. And that really led me also to look at, the CrossFit pyramid, for example, or the fitness pyramid. And at the base of that is nutrition, right? And then so I started looking at other pyramids as well. And there's not breathing on there anywhere. Would you go as far as to say that perhaps breathing should be at the base of a fitness or a life pyramid in general?
Absolutely. So we know that eating is really important. Nutrition is very important. Exercising is very important. But you can do both of those things, be really good at both of those things. But if you're breathing inadequately or incorrectly, you are never, ever going to be healthy. And you see this with a lot of weightlifters, even people who have developed all of this musculature around their necks. So they can't breathe properly without sticking their necks out here to open up their airways. And, I heard this from researchers long ago when I, saw those dudes down at Venice Beach. They're all slicked up with oil, tan, super buff. You're like, that is the pinnacle of health right there. But I learned a lot of these people in their 40s and 50s can suffer from really serious heart problems and can die. I was like, how does this make any sense? These are the healthiest people on the planet, but it's because their breathing has been so dysfunctional for so long.
Yeah, Dave, sorry, I thought you were going to say something there, but
I have a lot of things to say. I just want to follow up with there.
It's just fascinating because, as I was looking at that pyramid and I assumed that you were going to say that because one of the things at the bottom of some of those pyramids also is sleeping at, one of them says sleeping 7 to 9 hours. And, with the stuff that I'm learning, I feel like breathing perhaps should go before that, because if you're breathing correctly, then you're going to be able to sleep better. Does that sound fair?
So good sleeping is good breathing. So breathing, it has to start with that. They've taken all of these studies with insomniacs and found that more than half of them They have insomnia because they have sleep apnea, because they aren't breathing properly. So that to me says the very first thing you have to do is to fix the breathing. Then if there's psychological, mental issues to why they aren't sleeping properly, then you can address those. But you have to start with the physical problem. And what has happened, and there was this big report in the Mayo Clinic put out a few years ago, is a lot of people with insomnia are given tranquilizers to go to sleep, which makes their breathing worse, which softens up all these tissues, and they suffer from snoring and sleep apnea even more. And I'm sure you know, but snoring and sleep apnea, both those things are so injurious to health. So sleep and breathing, I don't view those things as separate. I view them as one concrete thing.
And for you, James, personally, going through the book and discussing specifically the tests that you had done at Stanford for the research purposes, can you talk a little bit about what you did to kind of get a little bit more understanding of what nasal breathing is doing versus what is mouth breathing, and what you found over those 10 days of initial understanding of plugging up the nose, breathing only through your mouth, and then the changes that happened fairly quickly once that was over?
Sure. So I had always learned that it didn't matter if we were breathing through our nose or our mouth. It was the same thing. Like growing up, it's like, well, that's what you have a mouth for, to
Right.
breathe out of. And so I was breathing through my mouth throughout much of my youth. I see pictures of myself just breathing through my mouth. And even into adulthood, especially when I was working out, I was breathing through my mouth all the time, and was never told by anyone that this was not the way to breathe. Until I started doing some research. I'm in San Francisco, so I'm close to Stanford, which is, one of the top research institutions in the world. And so I was able to go down there and start talking to the experts in the field. And I spent a lot of time with Dr. Jayakar Nayak, who's the chief of rhinology research down at Stanford, big nose guy. So he's like, there are innumerable benefits to breathing through the nose, and no one's going to tell you otherwise who's actually studied this stuff. And the quick laundry list is humidifies air, filters air, pressurizes air. You get 20% more oxygen breathing through your nose than you do through your mouth, increase of nitric oxide. All of these things allow you to digest and use oxygen so much more efficiently. And if you think that's not going to make an impact on you in your day-to-day life, you're crazy. So again, not a lot of controversy there. And we know that mouth breathing is really injurious to health as well, because when you're breathing through the mouth, you can just think of your lungs like an external organ, like you're just carrying them in front of you, because they're exposed to everything in your environment when they're not being filtered through the nose. If you live in a city like I do, that means pollution, that means pollens, that means whatever else is, that means COVID, that means whatever else is in the air at that time. So again, not a lot of controversy about that either, but no one knew how quickly the damage from mouth breathing came on. No one had studied that specifically. So we put together a little study of me and one other breathing therapist. He had no money allocated for this, so I had to pay for it, which totally sucked, because this is at Stanford too, not cheap. Where we spent 10 days plugged up, our noses plugged up, only breathing through our mouth, and then 10 days trying to breathe through our nose as much as possible. We compared data sets from there.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I mean, what you got from that research and what you got from those 20 days of testing is pretty extraordinary in terms of prior and post. But one of the things that you talk about that I'd like to kind of talk about here is this idea of kind of dis or de-evolution. You mentioned this a little bit, where we weren't always like this. We weren't always breathing through our mouths. We were much healthier when it came to breathing earlier on, prior to maybe Industrial Revolution, maybe once we started getting a little bit more domestication of animals. Can you talk about what changed over the course of human history and why this has become such an issue for us in modern times?
So when you set out writing a book about breathing, the science of breathing, the last place you imagine yourself in is surrounded by a bunch of ancient human skulls. And so I knew this story was getting super weird when I was in a museum in Philly and just looking through skulls. And what I found, which was totally stunning, and anyone can see this, you can look up ancient skulls online. I'm in this room, filled with all these walnut cabinets, skulls from all over the world, from Asia, from Russia, from Africa, South America, on and on and on, from the past few hundred years to even 1,000 years old. They're all in these cabinets, and they all have perfectly straight teeth. Every single one of them. And if you look at humans today, there's a good chance if you didn't have braces, your teeth are totally crooked. I had braces, headgear, extractions, all that crap. So it's so common that people just like, when you're getting when are you getting your wisdom teeth removed? This is so not normal for an animal to get its wisdom teeth removed, but it's become completely common now. And our ancestors just 300 years ago had none of these problems. They didn't have dentists or orthodontists. They had perfectly straight teeth. So what has happened, and I could go on and on about that, but our mouths have grown so small, the teeth have nowhere to grow in. So they grow in crooked. They fight for space. So when you have a mouth that's too small for its face, that also means you have a smaller airway. You have less room to breathe. Which is one of the main reasons so many of us suffer from sleep apnea, snoring, even there's correlations with asthma, with allergies, on and on and on, is having this super small face. So evolution does not work in a straight line. It does not mean progress. So forget what you hear about Darwin, survival of the fittest crap. That's not how it works. And if you want to know an example of this, look in the mirror sometime. and there's the proof right there.
Is there any theories as to why mouths have gotten smaller over the course of the last 300 years? What are the thoughts on why that is actually happening?
Yeah, there's facts, and that's what we have. This isn't really even controversial nowadays, and yet still no one seems to be talking about, which I was just shocked about. So I kept talking to different experts at Harvard, at University of Penn, and they all kept telling me the same thing. Then they all kept showing me different facts. And my God, this stuff is true. So what happened with, it so happens to be, it's not a coincidence why like 300, 400 years ago, our mouths started getting smaller and smaller and our teeth started growing more crooked. So something caused that. It wasn't just some random thing that happened. What caused it was industrialized food. This was right at the time when we got really good at removing the bran and germ from wheat to make pulverized white flour. We got really good at removing the bran and germ from rice to make polished white rice. We started canning stuff. We started bottling stuff. So for the first time in human history, in the history of any animal on earth, you were able to subsist on a diet that was completely soft. So without having any chewing stress. So our ancestors used to chew for about 4 hours a day. That's why they had these badass, huge jaws, very powerful mouths. Nowadays, I mean, you think about what's even considered healthy food now: smoothies, avocados, nootropic gel goo, Go-Gurt. That's not healthy. Yogurt. I mean, all this stuff is soft. So we're not chewing. So our faces don't develop properly, which means our mouths are too small, which means we have problems breathing.
Yeah, it really makes me think that you talk about chewing for 4 hours a day, and I'm assuming that they probably weren't brushing their teeth back then either. So is this why the whole reason why we have to brush our teeth these days?
That's a good point. I think that has more to do with the quality of our food, the nutrients in our food, specifically the amount of sugar in our foods. If you look at hunter-gatherers, they did not have caries. They did not have widespread cavities. They did not have any of these problems. But you look at sugar used to be this luxury of the rich. They started getting it cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. Everyone starts eating sugar. And now, I mean, it's crazy. We're brushing 3 times a day with fluoride toothpaste. We still have way more cavities than our ancestors did. Yeah. So it's just absolutely bizarre, the human folly and the myopia that goes into looking at the core issues of health.
Well, the one thing that I found to be really interesting is that this essentially is fixable, however, right? A lot of these things in terms of breathing, these are not permanent. These are things that are fixable in just the way that we inhale and exhale. And can you give a little bit of insight into what's happening right now with our normal inhalation exhalation process and why that's detrimental in a lot of ways and what we want to be optimally seeing?
So the first thing you have to do to get your breathing in check is to remove any obstruction. So you're never ever going to be healthy if you're struggling to breathe 20,000 times a day. Okay. It's never ever going to work out. And there's various ways you can do that. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a breathing therapist. I can't give you a blanket prescription for everyone because everyone's different. Some people need surgical interventions to clear their noses for sure. A lot of people don't. What they need to do is start to learn to become obligate nasal breathers. This is how we began. Look at any animal in the wild. Look at a cheetah hunting down its prey at 60 miles per hour, breathing through its nose. Look at a horse on a track running, beating everyone else, breathing through its nose. So we need to be doing the same thing. So just breathing through the nose is going to help tone all that soft tissue in the airway. So it can actually improve your breathing and help widen your airways, breathing through the nose. So you can do other exercises. There are a lot of studies looking into oral pharyngeal exercises. And what these are is you've got your tongue, right? It's this badass muscle. It is so powerful. And actually the strongest muscle per weight is the back of our molars, clenching our teeth down. We can put something like 175 pounds of weight back there. So when we're not exercising these things, they grow flimsy, just like anything else. So these exercises have you put the tongue to the roof of your mouth. It's just like lifting weights, but it's for your oral cavity here. And this will tone those structures and make it easier for you to breathe. So another thing that's very important is to have correct oral posture. We know the importance of having good posture throughout the day, of having a straight spine. You guys certainly know the importance of this when you're lifting a large load, of having posture is everything. We need good oral posture. And what that means is keep your mouth closed, your teeth lightly touching, tongue at the roof of the mouth. You're going to notice when you do that, you have more room in your airway. When you open your mouth just slightly and slacken it, the tongue rocks back and helps to close your airway, which is why if you close your mouth when you're sleeping, there's going to be less of a chance you're going to suffer from snoring and sleep apnea, because you're helping to open that airway. So those two simple things: nasal breathe all the time, correct oral posture, exercise your mouth. So you can eat hard food, you can eat real food. What a concept. You can do these exercises and keep eating soft goop, or you can eat the food that we've been designed to eat.
Yeah.
Raw whole foods can do a lot of help.
Yeah, as you're talking through those recommendations, those are things that, I mean, I'm just envisioning what I'm doing in the moment as I'm listening to you. And I feel like those things are mostly natural to me, up to the point where you talk about nasal breathing while I'm physically exerted. Now, as soon as I start to breathe hard, I pretty quickly go to my mouth. So when you say those things, it indicates that there are a lot of people out there that aren't naturally doing those things. So why aren't they naturally doing those things? And then let's take it to the extent of, should we all be completely nasal breathing when we're completely physically exerted? Were the ancient humans doing that?
Yeah, great question. So the reason why so many of us aren't breathing through our noses while we're exercising is because we can't, because our noses are plugged for all those reasons I mentioned before. That doesn't mean we're totally screwed. It means we can absolutely affect our airway health. We can affect our noses by adjusting our breathing and adjusting our oral posture. I've seen this in myself. I've seen this in dozens of other people. Having said that, I want to be totally clear again. Some people do need surgery to clear up their noses. But from what I've learned at Stanford, I talked for many times, many meetings with the doctor of speech language pathology down there by the name of Ann Kearney. She was slated for nasal surgery, obligate mouth breather. She started thinking about this a little more. She's like, the nose is a use it or lose it organ. I'm just going to try to force myself to breathe through my nose all day and all night. She completely cleared up her nose, a vast difference. And now she's training her patients to do the same thing. So when it comes to exercise, is a lot of people associate that need to breathe with a lack of oxygen. So if you're jogging, and if you're jogging at a really, really fast speed, you're like, I totally need to breathe. What you are feeling is an increase of CO2 you are not feeling a lack of oxygen. That's what triggers the need to breathe. And you can see this by wearing a pulse oximeter, which I had this one went around the wrist, and we would get on these stationary bikes and try to breathe as slowly as we could. And my oxygen wasn't moving. So I felt like I was suffocating. It was freaking awful breathing at a rate of 6 breaths per minute while I was just pumping out as hard as I could. But my CO2 was increasing. And there are so many benefits to having slightly more CO2 than we're used to for circulation and for oxygenation throughout the body, because oxygen will dissociate from hemoglobin more easily when it's surrounded by CO2. So we need CO2 to dislodge oxygen. So CO2 gets this really bad rap in the environment because it is causing all these problems, the acidity of the ocean, all true. But for the human body, you need a healthy balance of CO2. So I think by just understanding that need to breathe, not oxygen, it's CO2, and knowing that the nose is this amazingly plastic organ, by that I mean it can adjust. It's filled with tissues that can vastly expand. I've seen CAT scans before and after, huge changes in the airway by just using your nose a little more.
That was one of the big take-home points. We had Patrick McEwen on the podcast not that long ago, and that was one of the big take-home points that we had after, listening to Oxygen Advantage, things like that. The counterintuitive thought of growing up of saying CO2 is terrible for you, you want CO2, in with the good, out with the bad, get rid of it, as opposed to CO2 having such benefits in terms of oxygen actually being able to do its job. Now, I want to just make sure that I'm understanding this point correctly, because, a lot of our listeners are in the fitness and specific CrossFit world, and they're normally working out at near maximal efforts. Now, there's a difference between being able to nasal breathe at suboptimal levels, but when you're getting to that point where you're almost at your lactate threshold and you're at a point where, you're about to pass out, we're seeing most people needing to open up or get as much air through as possible so that they can actually continue with a workout. Are you saying that it's beneficial to stay below that point so that you can continue nasal breathing no matter what? Or are there some areas, some workouts, some times where breathing through the mouth is going to have some benefit when you're at that near maximal effort?
Yeah, another great question. I would say that I'm going to repeat something from Patrick McEwen, who's a good friend. I've learned so much from him. He said, never work out harder than you can breathe correctly. So if your breathing goes to hell and you're slow it down, build your aerobic base. And by continuing to build that aerobic base, you are going to be able to go further. You're going to be able to go farther. You're going to be able to recover much more easily. And Dr. John Douillard, who's been studying this stuff with endurance athletes for 30 years, for 40 years, has found there are clear benefits to performance and recovery by nasal breathing. To be clear, what you guys are doing when you're reaching these insane thresholds, especially with lifting weights, I don't know the proper way of breathing during that. And my hunch is you breathe whatever way you can to lift a huge load. But I do know at those higher zones of intensity, nasal breathing is going to allow you to operate more efficiently. And so these people who are saying there's no way I'm getting enough breath, there's impossible, would highly suggest putting a pulse ox on them and viewing what happens. I've seen it in myself. I'm not one of those, up to your level of endurance, anywhere close to it. But I was pumping out as hard as I possibly could on a stationary bike, and I could not ding my oxygen. My CO2 was through the roof, but my oxygen was locked in the same way, even though I felt this extreme need to breathe. So, man, if you guys want to do some tests, I would be fascinated by that. To have these people just go for it, enter into the highest zone of endurance, watching their oxygen. To be clear, nasal breathing, if you haven't been doing it all the time when you're working out, is a complete pain in the ass. So a lot of people give up because they spend a couple days, they're like, I can't work out at anywhere near my capacity. You're going to drop. You're going to drop maybe 30, 40%. People are like, well, why do I want to do that? You want to do that to build your base. So Douillard said it took him like 4 or 5 months to get up to the level where he was mouth breathing. And then he eclipsed anything that he was doing after that. He just completely blew it away.
That's super interesting.
Wow.
And Chad, I mean, I'm listening to this, and James, I don't know how much you know about kind of what we do, and our mantra is that technique matters in the way that we move. And you know, we come from high level backgrounds in our own athletic fields, and we try to promote an athletic foundation that allows for higher level movement to be learned later down the road. What you're saying is essentially that same thing, the same thing, that technique around breathing needs to be built around a solid foundation if you're going to be able to achieve your highest level potential. So what people are doing is they're skipping steps, right? They're taking whatever the breathing technique that they have is right now and just applying it to their athletic endeavors, but it's not allowing them to reach their maximum potential.
I completely agree. You can apply this to almost any sport. You can apply it to surfing. You can apply it to, weightlifting. So you can start off by doing something and show some real progress, but you're going to plateau because your technique isn't right. So by instead first starting with the proper technique and building on that base, you're going to be able to progress so much further than you would otherwise. I realize that's just a regurgitation of what you just said, but I'm just saying it because I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
And I want to mention one more thing before, so I don't lose my track of thought here, because I think this is so critical, because even in our world of athletics, most people, even in the endurance world, are teaching breathing techniques. Breathing techniques are very well, established in a lot of the endurance world, but a lot of it is in through the nose and out through the mouth. There's a lot of exhalation through the mouth that's taught. And I wonder if that is just a previous generation teaching something that was taught before them, and they're just kind of continuing along that line, not knowing of the research. But, you bring up some research in the book dealing with, the 68 Yale track team, where, they were part of a research that showed nasal breathing being such a benefit for them across the board, and leading to, beyond just that track team, leading to much more success at the Olympic level. I'm wondering why that research was lost, or if that hasn't been transferred into other teams or other sports from that point.
Well, this is a question I kept asking myself while I was spending years and years researching this book. I was not looking for these weirdo stories where someone discovered something, it was never disproven, and then it just disappeared.
Right.
And then it was discovered 50 years later. I mean, let's just look at the keto diet and epilepsy. So it's been around for 100 years. It worked so effectively for epilepsy 100 years ago. Completely, not only was it forgotten, but it was ridiculed for 80 years. And now guess what they're doing? They're using the keto diet to treat epilepsy because none of the drugs have been working. So breathing is definitely in that same category where no one disproved that Carl Stout went to Yale. He found these sprinters. Yeah, they were super fast. They were relatively fit. They were awful breathers. He said that they had worse asthma. They had worse breathing problems than someone else on the street. They just pushed through the pain, which is why they were essentially disposable. They could compete for 3 years and then they were toast. So he only taught them how to breathe properly. And then he went on to train the 1968 track team, who were going to be competing in Mexico City, elevation of 6,000, 7,000 feet. They destroyed everybody, and they didn't use oxygen before or after the race. They're like, we don't need to. We know how to breathe. So no one disproved that worked, but for some crazy reason, people just went on and came up with these other methods. Always exhale through the mouth. And so you asked the question, and as a reporter, that's what I said. Why should we be exhaling to the mouth? Well, because we should be exhaling through the mouth. So what research says we should be? Well, that's what my coach told me. And so much of, as you guys know, so much of the world works like this. It's just bizarre.
Yeah, we get that all the time as teachers in the community, for sure, just because someone else told you to do something and you trust that person too. Like, you trust your coach usually, right? If you don't, maybe you should have a different coach. But so that it just passes on down the line. But one of the specifics that I heard Patrick mention about breathing out your mouth, breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth is, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe he said 42% water loss when you breathe out your mouth. So how is that different from when you breathe out your nose, and why does that matter?
Yeah. So what you're doing when you're breathing in, you're humidifying air, and when you're breathing out, you're capturing that humidity. when it comes out, because it's forced through all these structures, all these hairs, all the cilia, all this mucus. So you're creating almost this closed system of humidity. So when you see people out jogging, and I'm sure you guys see this, they've got belts with like 6 different water bottles. They're jogging for an hour.
Mm-hmm.
That's not normal. You don't need to do that. If all you need to do is close your mouth and you can retain that water, you're still going to be blowing off some moisture. No doubt about it. But at such a lesser degree than you would breathing out of your mouth. So a lot of people think, like, you know, and just to mention the track runners again, they think there's no way you're getting enough oxygen when you're doing super high endurance sprints. Look at the top sprinter for the past 10 years, woman sprinter, Sonia Richards-Ross, you know, obligate nasal breather for 10 years, and check out some pictures of her competing. So it's just, to me, it's show me the data. And that's why I'm so looking forward. I'm not going to say I wish, because I know you guys are going to do this. Looking forward to you guys getting some pulse oximeters on these CrossFit people to look at their O2. Maybe we'll learn something we didn't know. Maybe I'm totally wrong. I'm totally open to that, but I think you'll be surprised at what you find.
Yeah, man.
Dave,
I wish we would have had this conversation prior to our.
Right.
We have a big fitness camp that we host twice a year, where we bring 150 people to this location in the middle of the woods in Tennessee and run tests and have all these technical conferences and things like that. And we just came back yesterday, and it would have been great to be able to test out the athletes. We'll have to put the on the agenda for next camp that we have in the spring. But this is almost upsetting to me. This is almost upsetting that this is seemingly something that people have had extreme success with in the past, and it wasn't something that was continued. It's really like a lost art in a lot of ways, but the research there, the success at the high level, both at the Olympic and the collegiate level, is there. Stau's research is still available, and it was never something that was, I don't know, looked into a little bit more. I mean, we work with some really top level endurance coaches and athletes, and I haven't heard one of them talk about this as something that they utilize. And it's frustrating to me, because it seemed like it's something that should be readily available for everyone to see.
I think that's going to be changing pretty quickly. I've talked to a number of trainers, and they're all have either been poking around in this world for a while, or they're all actively retraining their athletes to breathe properly. And they said some of these people are breathing so much more dysfunctionally than Joe Schmo. You know, it's just, these people are badasses. They've got a very large threshold for pain. They will push through it. They will make it happen. But I was just talking to one individual yesterday who deals with a lot of NFL stars, a lot of football people. He's like, it's no coincidence that these guys are, you know, they're good for about 3 or 4 years. And once they stop working out at that level, a lot of them get diabetes. A lot of them get extremely sick. They get extremely obese. Like, that isn't a long-term plan for health, to max someone out, to extract all their energy, and then to throw them away. So he's taking this different approach, and breathing is the center of everything he's doing right now. So again, I think it's something that we're just realizing, we're rediscovering here. And I would, recommend that if people don't believe this stuff, look at the science and look at the data. I spent years in this world looking for something that was wrong in this, because that's my job. I'm not here to pick sides. And if I found something that compromised this other worldview, of course I would include it. But I didn't. And that's where it got even scarier for me. I said, why aren't people doing this? Not only for athletes, but for emphysemics. Carl Stau worked for 10 years in the top VA hospitals on the East Coast, rehabilitated people better than any other therapy, completely ignored now. Pretty crazy.
Yeah, that is nuts. It's absolutely.
You got me on my soapbox now. You seem very activated. I'll calm down. I'll breathe slowly.
No, that's what we want. Now, one of the other topics that I wanted to bring up, as I was digging into this and everything else, is I think a lot of people have questions about breathing in masks, since we're all wearing a lot of masks these days. And the simple answer that you guys give is that the same thing. We need to be breathing through our nose. And that made me wonder, if we're all breathing correctly through our nose, in and out, while we have these masks on for long periods of time during the day, are we going to come out on the other end as better breathers? Like it seems like somewhat of an overload principle that I use in weightlifting.
Well, we're doing the largest scale experiment ever in the history of humankind right now. I would hope that we would come back better breathers. I take wearing a mask, again, I live in San Francisco, so I've got to wear one all the time, as an opportunity to focus on my breath and to slow down my breathing. So a lot of people have said, I'm being asphyxiated by carbon dioxide. I'm not able to get oxygen through this mask. This is ruining, I'm getting headaches, blah, blah, blah. Again, just look at the studies or put a pulse oximeter on. And the studies I've seen about 3 of them. There is no oxygen deficit from wearing a mask. Oxygen gets in just fine. What they're responding to, once again, is an increase of CO2 because you're going to trap a little more CO2 in there at the beginning. So you're going to recycle a little more of that, but that is not putting you in an oxygen debt. If anything, it's probably has some benefits to allowing you to inhale a little more CO2 and to offload more oxygen to those hungry cells. So I wish there were more studies being done with this, but right now, this is the last thing anyone's concerned about.
Right.
You know, everyone's trying to come up with a vaccine.
Yeah, I mean, that I'm curious if there is a point with the CO2, and you probably know the answer to this already. Is there a point where too much CO2 becomes detrimental? And is that happening to anyone on a regular basis, especially in the fitness world? Would that be something that we'd have to worry about?
Absolutely, there is. With people with chronic, with COPD, with emphysema, who can't exhale properly, CO2 is a huge problem. So the difference is when you're working out, someone who's already healthy, I have never seen, there's people who hold their breath in a pool and pass out. Idiotic. Don't do any breath hold stuff anywhere near water. I wouldn't do it while lifting weights at all. But to control your breathing and to do it in a very structured way and to force yourself to breathe less, to get more of a tolerance for CO2, from what I've seen, there is only a benefit from doing that. Either you can pull more energy from states of anaerobic energy, you can pull more energy from lactate, and that's what Xavier Warrens at Paris 13 University has found. He's done 10 years of research into this, but more importantly is it allows you to utilize more oxygen. And I included like about a dozen of the hundreds of studies right now looking into, they call it normobaric hypoxia training. Normobaric just means sea level. I don't know why scientists need to use these stupid long names. But what they found is when they force people to breathe below their metabolic needs for short, it's almost like interval training, right? For short amount of time, they burn more fat. So it reduces fat. It also helps with cardiovascular problems because you're increasing circulation. It helps with performance, on and on and on. And so you can check out those studies, and there's so many of them. So to answer your question specifically, don't do it near water. Is there a point in which you're getting too much CO2 when you're consciously practicing these breathing methods? I haven't seen it. I'm not going to say that doesn't exist, but I haven't seen it because your body has a pretty good regulating system to let you know when you really need to breathe. But don't do this driving. Don't do it in any situation where if you get lightheaded, you're going to have problems.
I could see myself doing something like that, trying to drive and do it at the same time, just out of
No.
curiosity. So I won't do that. But earlier when you were talking about all the research that you've done and everything else, and maybe you brought this point up already, but I'm curious, what is the strangest thing that you've come across, or the most surprising thing that you've come across as you've been researching?
I think the craziest stuff that I found was when these people had focused on breathing for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and were able to do crap that just is still considered scientifically impossible. And when I brought the studies, which were published in Nature, top scientific journal in the world, I would show this to researchers and they would actually go, oh, no, I don't believe that. That's impossible. And these are scientists who are writing textbooks. So that was a little disconcerting, but more open-minded scientists will understand that, you know, science does not have an endpoint. Just because someone's written a biology book doesn't mean that everything we know about biology stops there. It is constantly changing. So if you're a good scientist, if you're a proper scientist, you're going to be adjusting your worldview for what the data is saying. So with all that caveat right there, the craziest crap I've seen has been this Tummo stuff. So, and these are monks who for hundreds of years, travelers to India and Tibet and Nepal, they come back and said, there's these monks and they can sit in the snow for 8 hours with a thin sheet on and melt a circle around themselves and get up and go like this and go back in the monastery and be perfectly fine. And they spend all winter with no heavy clothes on, just heating their bodies up. Impossible, right? Until Herbert Benson at Harvard Medical School went out and found these guys and said they're absolutely able to do it. But what was confounding is they're able to do it by decreasing their metabolism by about 65% lower than it usually is. The lowest amount anyone has ever seen. So by consuming less oxygen, they're able to turn their heat up in their bodies, which still to this day, no one knows how they do it, which I think is wonderful. It frustrates some scientists, but there's still mysteries to know about breathing, and that's one of them.
That's amazing. That's incredible. You know, as you've been researching, again, you're a researcher, you're an author, and all the things that go along with that. I'm always curious to hear, is there anything that you know now that you wish you would have known, 10 years ago?
I think everything I discovered in this book, I honestly mean that. If I had known this as a kid, my face wouldn't have been as messed up. I wouldn't have had so many respiratory problems. I wouldn't have had pneumonia for 4 times. I wouldn't have had bronchitis. I really believe that. And the fact that breathing is free, the fact that it's available to anyone, the fact that we carry around our breath with us every single day of our lives is a wonderful opportunity to really take and to improve our health. Specifically the stuff about what I learned about modern orthodontics, about how they can make breathing a lot worse. Because what do? You have a mouth that's too small for the face, so the teeth no longer fit. So let's remove teeth and make that mouth even smaller so the teeth are straight. It ruins your profile and it ruins your ability to breathe. And this is it's so controversial, but there's this sea change happening in orthodontics right now, and the crap is really about to hit the fan. And the people in that field, the scientists who've spent years studying this, said this is going to be bigger than tobacco. What we've done to people and how we've messed up their faces and their ability to breathe.
So the potential being that they would move away from removing teeth and figuring out other ways to enhance passages so that it doesn't have those negative effects in long run.
So guess what we were doing 100 years ago? To straighten teeth, we were expanding the upper palate. We were expanding the mouth, which if you think about it, teeth no longer fit. Let's expand the playing field. Teeth growing straight, you expand the airway. So the first functional orthodontics weren't even designed to help straighten teeth. They were designed to open airways. So and this is how it was done for 30, 40 years throughout Europe, even longer than the US. The 1940s come around, some guy comes around and says, oh, we need to extract and use braces because this system works for everyone. Expansion is pretty tricky, okay? You have to be really good at what you're doing. But braces, man, extracting teeth, putting braces on, headgear, you can it's production line teeth straightening. And that's what's happened for the past 70, 80 years. And look around at the effects that it's had. Look around the amount of people who have TMJ problems, who have breathing problems, whose faces look very different. And it's pretty depressing. So everyone's
making me upset, James. You're making me
I know.
upset.
I keep rambling. You guys are asking good questions. So to answer your question, I could have just cut out all that middle part.
No. We want that. We want that.
But what they're doing now,
so many things Go ahead. I'm sorry.
The standard for kids is, guess what they're doing? They're expanding freaking palates to allow teeth to grow in straight, to allow for proper airway growth. And so not only does this allow you to have a better smile, it accentuates the natural profile of your face better. And this is now, mark my words, in 10 years, this is what Dr. Michael Gelb said. He said, we're going to look back at what we've done and be horrified.
Wow.
And I truly believe that.
Wow.
It's amazing psychologically how we as humans, we're always trying to progress. We're always taking steps forward. But I mean, as we're learning more and more with a lot of different things, we're actually going backwards. And it's, Dave, you're saying you're getting frustrated over there, and that's frustrating, and that's scary as well, because, what else have we not discovered that is heading in the negative direction that think we're perfectly fine with?
Well, I think the good news is we have knowledge now. We have different ways of getting out this information, what you guys are doing on this podcast, what other people are doing in books, and people are hip to it. I mean, we've been lied to for so long with nutrition. I mean, think about all the crap I was eating in the 80s and told that this was healthy food, man. High carb, high sugar, everything canned, everything wrapped in plastic. And so we know our folly, right? We've learned, and I'd be hard pressed to find someone nowadays who says that food is better than whole foods now. No one's going to say that. So I view this as inspiring, right? It's like we're going to learn from our mistakes, and we're not going to go back to the way we were doing things before. Do you think people are going to stop going to farmers markets and start going to Food Co to buy a bunch of packaged Cheetos? Like I don't. So what's done has been done. Let's just find a way of fixing it and go forward.
Right. So one of the things that one of the biggest take-home points from the book that I took for me personally was the idea of just breathing less and how beneficial that is. And so, I mean, I've been trying to adhere to the recommendation here of a 5-second inhale, 5-second exhale, trying to get 5.5 breaths per minute and that type of a rhythm, try to keep that in place. Is that generally the thought there? Just breathing less is going to have a lot more benefits than kind of take that as the top recommendation from what we can be doing on a daily basis?
So breathing less, those practices are almost like a form of weight training. What you want to do is to get your body comfortable with that level so that you breathe normally the rest of the time unconsciously. So it's going to be really hard throughout the day to breathe 6 breaths per minute. But if you focus on doing that for 5 to 10 minutes a day, just that amount of time, they show, has this huge impact on your health, which is amazing. So that is acclimating you to a higher threshold of CO2. And it is training yourself to get more comfortable with breathing slowly. The point of all of these breathing methods is to breathe normally. It's not to breathe less than we should be. It's to breathe within our metabolic needs, which for the vast majority of us is way less than we think we need. It's just like food, right? It's less than we think we need, but our bodies can compensate when we're breathing more than we need to. Our bodies will find a way of getting by. It doesn't mean they're healthy. Why overwork them if we don't have to? Your body needs to heal itself every day, and that's how breathing slowly and breathing less can really do that for you.
Have you had any recommendations, or what do you think about actually physically taping the mouth shut for physical activity or for sleeping purposes?
It sounded super sketchy to me when I heard about it years ago, and I went on YouTube and it seemed even more sketchy to me. People had like 9 pieces of tape all over their mouth. I said, screw that. I'm not going to do that. Until I talked to researchers at Stanford, until I talked to Dr. Mark Burheny, who's been studying this stuff for decades. And it's known taping your mouth at night, if you are a mouth breather at night, is the quickest, most effective way of becoming an obligate nasal breather. So I sleep with this stuff. I've done it for the last couple of years. You can use any kind of tape you want, right? There's a bunch of stuff, specific sleep tape on Amazon. All of it works. All of it works great. So use whatever works for you. This is just 3M micropore hypoallergenic tape. You get this at Walgreens or Amazon or whatever. I just take a teeny little piece like that. I do not hermetically seal my lips shut. I put it right there. At any time, I can take it off. It's that easy to take it off. It's just training my mouth shut. I didn't think I would need this after using it for a couple of months, but I do. I don't have the jawline to naturally have my mouth shut at night. Whenever I don't use this, my mouth just goes.
So you do put it on every night?
Yeah. My wife doesn't think it's too hot, but I think living an extra 20
Right.
years might be more appealing to her. Because, and I've noticed my O2 sats throughout the night are much higher breathing through the nose, which of course they are. That makes sense. I sleep so much better, so much more sound. And literally hundreds of people have written who have even had moderate sleep apnea, moderate snoring, have used this, no longer suffer from those problems. And the worst thing that can happen is maybe it's not going to work perfectly for you. It's basically free. And the science is very clear that this has a profound effect on a lot of people.
Sounds better than having to be on a lot of medication and all that other stuff and machines and everything else. And, some of my relatives are on breathing machines at night. And, I don't know if I can get them to listen to me, but I'll certainly try. And, with that, my biggest takeaway is certainly we should keep our mouths shut as much as possible. And maybe that'll keep us all out of trouble as well. I'm not sure.
So with my relatives are all on CPAPs too. And so my mom really wanted to go on a cruise. She was turning 80, and your mom turns 80. You say, oh, fuck, I guess I'm going on a cruise with you. Right. But they actually had like a separate place for people to put their CPAPs, because every single person on that cruise had a CPAP. And I thought to myself, what the hell is wrong? That we can't sleep now without a terrestrial scuba gear on our faces. Right. So I would check out your relative. I've tried to tell my relatives the same thing. Of course, they don't listen to me, but these oral pharyngeal exercises, these were reported in Chest, very well-respected scientific journal, of just exercising this area, even for people with weight problems, can have a profound effect on sleep apnea and help people get off those machines. And again, it doesn't take a lot of time. And what's there to lose? Right. You're breathing better. There's really nothing to lose.
Yeah,
I'll do that for sure. Yeah, on the chance that one or two of them will listen, I'll do that.
Okay, right on.
But yeah, I can't imagine that's going to be an easy change for most people, right? But we're talking about looking sexy at night. I'm pretty sure a piece of tape is a lot sexier than wearing a CPAP machine, So,
oh, yes.
To be clear, like CPAP machines have saved innumerable
Sure.
I'm not bagging on that technology. They work, and people with severe sleep apnea, they work wonders. Yeah. They do nothing for the core problem of sleep apnea, okay? They do nothing to improve your airway health. So why not, let's try to improve airway health first while using a CPAP, and then you can lightly get yourself off that machine. That's what I would do, and it seems like no one wants to wear that crap, right? But they want to breathe well. So I think it's maybe a dual technique. Wear your CPAP, but also do some of these exercises.
And
they're
Chad,
your training wheels.
That reminds me, Chad, a lot of what we talk about when it comes to weightlifting belts, wrist guards, knee guards, and all of these other things they're basically tools to help people work through positions that might be painful, but it's not really addressing the core issue of what the problem is. So what ends up happening is the person becomes dependent on that apparatus. Right. And so,
Just to second that, to pipe in one more second here, for people who have having real problems nasal breathing, who want to adapt to nasal breathing, Breathe Right strips and mute strip there are these mute inserts. They work awesome, and they can increase your airflow through your nose about 30%, which is huge. Yeah. So I'm not a breathing therapist, but I've mentioned to people, try those out because they're great training wheels. Once you get used to it, you're like, you know what? I can do this.
Right.
Then you can take those things off and try it. So there's nothing wrong with using these devices. Again, as you guys were saying, it's all about building that proper foundation, that proper base. And then you can start peeling these things off and letting your natural body work in its most efficient way.
Yeah, to me, that's exactly what we preach as well, right, Chad? I mean, you're not going to tell someone to take off a belt or a knee brace right away, but the idea is to wean off of it slowly so that your body can actually do those actions on their own. And so it's a process that we're trying to get people to move better and breathe better in the same type of techniques. So I really like that synergy there. Would you agree with that, Chad? Does that make sense from your end?
No doubt. I mean, through this whole recording, I keep in my head relating it back to exactly what we do. And I've had a couple light bulb moments through the recording as well. So it's been awesome, and great learning opportunity for myself, and I know it will be for the listeners as well.
Well, I'm more pissed off still than
Right.
anything else, because again, there's no reason why this should take us to 2020 to start figuring this stuff out, since it's already pretty clear from decades ago that this research was basically done. So I feel like we're behind the curve, and I appreciate your kind of diving back into this, James, and bringing it back to the forefront of people's understanding of what they should be doing.
Well, thanks a lot for having me. And again, I don't view this as a sob story. I view it as an opportunity to learn from these mistakes. Let's build a brighter future, with proper science and by letting our bodies do what they're naturally designed to do.
Absolutely. Well, before we jump off, we have a couple quick questions for you, if you're cool with it. One, Chad is a weightlifter, but I'm a gymnast, and we always ask our guests, and I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are, but what sport or discipline do you prefer, weightlifting or gymnastics?
Oh, you guys can't you can't do that. Surfing.
Diplomatic answer.
I mean, I hate to say it, but that's probably more in the lines of gymnastics, I would say. Surfing.
Agreed.
Body
I'll
weight, right?
give a half point for that one.
But I'm doing push-ups. There's a lot of push-ups involved in that.
Question 2 for you, James. Any guests that you would like to see on our podcast? Anybody that you think would be a really good guest for us to have on?
Dr. John Duyar.
Okay.
If you haven't had him on yet, this guy's been talking about exactly what we're talking about for 40 years, and no one was listening to him. And he's done so much amazing research. You guys will have a blast with him.
Fantastic. We'll definitely look him up.
Yeah, definitely. Last question here for you, and this is kind of a two-parter, but what one book, movie, documentary, or TV series do you most recommend?
Oh, that is a tough one. I'm not going to say Tiger King. Don't watch it.
Ooh, I don't know. I'm a fan. I'm from Oklahoma, so that is from my neck of the woods.
Oh, I couldn't take my eyes off it. I mean, me and everyone else. So I think you can get this for free online. Go read Self-Reliance by Ralph Waldo Emerson. It's very old. Some of the language is flowery, but talking about us being both pissed off and inspired, this is what he was talking about 150 years ago. So that's an easy one for me, and a very inspiring piece of literature as well. It's a short read, which is even better.
Nice. Well, James, is there anything that you have coming up that you want our listeners to know about? Anything that you're currently working on?
We're hoping to start some breathing studies. I've been contacted by a few different institutions who want to start putting together some stuff. I'd love to be in contact with you guys once we start booting this up. I think that more awareness, especially for kids, especially breathing. We did a global classroom event, which went out to 1 million kids, teaching them to shut their mouths, breathe through their noses. But I think that this is really the key going forward, is just to start establishing awareness, and to get it's so easy to breathe properly. So few people are doing it, but the benefits are really significant once you adopt it.
James, amazing information. And what I like most is that I can tell my daughter to shut her mouth in a nice way now. Instead of
saving her life. Yeah. Shut your mouth.
For
sure. You a favor by
it's for your own good. So we're all good there, but
not good for spouses though. Just a heads up.
I probably shouldn't go there. I know better than that after trying to coach my wife for so many years. And for some reason I don't learn my lesson. I'll bring it back up every now and then, but James, thank you so much for coming on. Great recording, great learning opportunity for all of us. And we hope to talk to you again at some point in the future. For our listeners, guys,
take it easy.
Absolutely.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. And for our listeners, guys, be sure to head over to powermonkeyfitness.com. Check out services and upcoming events. Also, check out our Instagram pages for regular teaching and technical content at Power Monkey Fitness, at Dave Durante, and at Ollie Chad. And on behalf of Power Monkey Fitness, we're your host. I'm Chad Vaughn with Dave Durante. And until next time, guys, thank you all for listening.